for a review of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning. Let's bring in a RISE analyst, Dr. Constance Ikoku. Good morning, Constance.
Good morning, Charles. Welcome back. You were away for a few days.
Thank you very much. Glad to be back.
Were you working or were you resting?
I wasn't. I definitely wasn't resting.
Okay. You were working. Okay, welcome back anyway. A very good morning to you, Yolanda and Nkechi.
Good morning, Dr. Constance.
I hope you guys are wonderful this morning.
Excellent.
Yes. Okay, bright smiles. We shall be discussing among ourselves today. We don't have a guest. Okay, hello there and welcome to the program. We'll begin with this day newspaper. In this day, Atiku, National Assembly leadership is corrupt. Says PDP is weak because its leaders are compromised. INEC notifies Kogi Senator, that's Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan, of recall process. The former Vice President, Alhaji Atiku Abubakar, expressed lack of surprise when speaking about the emergency rule proclamation that was approved by the National Assembly. This approval, or this PD approval, he implied, was because the legislature is corrupt. He went further to state that he has no apologies for saying that. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar is, publicly voicing already a widely held belief in this country or general perception about, the legislature. Is this of any import then, or does it change anything? Charles, what do you think?
It absolutely doesn't change anything. Atiku Abubakar is voicing his opinion. He's a Nigerian citizen and he is free to criticize. Of course, don't expect any backlash from the government this time around because it's not a youth corps. Anyway, I'm being funny with that.
Charles.
Anyway.
Maybe a response from the National Assembly itself.
Oh, well, it will just be a standard procedure response. They have to respond anyway. And when they respond, they'll also point fingers at Atiku Abubakar because, the corruption tag was also hung on him when he was vice president and even while he was running as the presidential candidate of the People's Democratic Party. But let's just say this is an instance where the opposition also has to criticize the government in power. That's exactly what Nasir El-Rufai did say, that as an opposition figure, it was his responsibility to criticize. And so, the issue of corruption, it's nothing new. We all know what's been happening, particularly this Natasha Akpoti-Uduaghan saga. Part of the writer did say that, all of a sudden she has received notification of her recall when INEC established the fact that it was a very irregular process. Then within 48 hours, the process was regularized. Oh, come on. Right. I think in this case, Atiku Abubakar does have a point.
Yeah, and just additionally to what Charles is saying, I think, again, Atiku, former Vice President Atiku Abubakar, is positioning himself for 2027. He's trying to frame himself, from what I see in that interview, as sort of the most credible statesman to head the opposition. Painting that opposition as crumbling. So obviously they need a credible statesman. I think he's putting himself in that position. And what better way to do it than aim at the National Assembly, who really is making it easy for everyone. They're really doing a very fine job, just setting themselves up.
When he was vice president, the National Assembly didn't have a different perception in the public space, so they have consistently over the time, I think, gotten worse. And like you said, Charles, also the vice president, the former vice president, has had this togo of corruption on his personality, which he has over the years denied and tried to shake off. I'm not sure whether that has changed anything. So we'll see how that goes. But it's an interesting time that we are in, and the political space is so infested that it is difficult to see how people that have good intentions are able to extract themselves from what is happening, because not everybody in the National Assembly is corrupt, or not everybody in politics in Nigeria is corrupt.
True. Absolutely.
Yeah, Yolanda wanted to say something.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for bringing me in there. When I watched the interview with Alhaji Atiku, I noticed that he spoke very calmly, and it didn't seem like he was trying to put on any political, but what do I know? Then again, I'm not a politician. But just watching it, I just thought that he was speaking from his heart and just saying how he felt, even when he was giving his remarks and his response to what he thought about, God's will Akpabio. I felt that he was just being very honest with what he has seen in his time in politics. If he will run again, I don't know how it will go for him this time round. But just as you have rightly said, it's becoming difficult to know who is who, because not all the eggs are bad in the bunch.
Well, every institution is judged by its leadership, so I
Yes.
think that's where the focus is, on the leadership of the National Assembly. And like Nkechi did point out, they're doing a very fantastic job of having those fingers pointed at them. And I think that's what Atiku Abubakar has latched onto, the behavior of the leadership of the National Assembly. And of course, he did make mention of the fact that a coalition will definitely arise ahead of 2027, the similar scenario to what happened in 2014.
And when asked about the presidential candidates for that coalition, he did say that everybody will run. So he hasn't ruled out his intention
Very
to
true.
run again.
Definitely.
Yeah, so more to come. Let's go to Daily Trust. Constitution amendment, immunity debate. What is good for the president is good for the vice president. The House of Representatives has passed a bill for second reading, which aims to strip the vice president, governors, and their deputy of immunity against prosecution while in office. The poser here is, why should the VP not have immunity when the president does? So Section 308 of the Constitution gives these public officers immunity from civil or criminal proceedings, but they lose this once out of office. Given the type of country that we run, will removing immunity not create chaos, like every time you're fighting,
Exactly.
for your life in office, Nkechi?
You're right. I think the president and the vice president are elected on a joint ticket. So if you're worried about accountability, why isolate the vice president? And I think this constitutional reform process that's going on should be rooted in principle and not politics. We need to be very careful, because the National Assembly, I know they've come out to say, look, the reason why we are passing some of these, why some of these bills are passing readings quickly is because we're trying to meet the timeline. I think December 2025, they're trying to meet some sort of timeline, but we need to focus on thoroughness and the process, because the constitutional review is very important. And when it comes to the chaos that you're talking about, I think it all ties in with this declaration of state of emergency in Rivers State and the suspension of the governor. Now, we don't really know if the suspension of the governor means absolute removal. What happens to his immunity? I think that also is in question now, and that's a part that people are beginning to talk about. So when you now go ahead and remove immunity from vice president, from governor, deputy governor, it just creates a sort of lacuna, and the person that wields the most power and can suspend governors can actually go ahead and then arrest them, a sitting governor. And then you create that uncertainty and chaos that you're talking about. So I think we need to be careful with this constitutional review process.
They say there is no smoke without fire. Why all of a sudden decide to remove immunity from the vice president? In the times past, political commentators would say the vice president is nothing but a spare tire, because he does not have any powers except those delegated to him by the president. And so this now makes that position a lot more vulnerable. I mean, what else did the vice president have to hold on to except immunity? So this time around, he's actually a complete appendage at the mercy and at the whims and caprices of the president, and I don't think that is very fair.
And when you look over the years at petitions, a lot of the petitions against public officials are frivolous, downright frivolous. Some have weight, and eventually some people are able to be brought to book. But it will create a lot of distraction, because at the end of the day, when they leave office, you can still pursue those criminal civil proceedings against them. So what is the point of all of this? Well, we're just discussing it is something that needs to be. And the other question is, do people have the time for this to go to public hearing so that we can have a robust debate about any of these changes that are going to happen and impact our lives?
You know, what happens in the States, what had happened in the States before, I know for sure that some governors had actually fallen out of love with their deputies,
right,
and then moved the state houses of assembly to have them, so to say, impeached. It has happened so often because the deputy governors, unlike the governors, don't have that sort of immunity. And so even if they're elected on a joint ticket, they can actually be removed at the instance of the governor when the relationship goes sour. Let's
see The Guardian. National automotive policy in limbo. 136 billion investments in stock. Here it says that 58 assemblies spent $756 million in 5 years of the Nigerian Automotive Industry Development Plan. Of the 58 firms, 20 closed operations in 2024. Only 6 are actively assembling vehicles, but with extremely low capacities. Well, good and bad news here. The government did have great intentions by introducing fiscal incentives way back in 2014 to attract capital investments required in this industry. The bad news is that it hasn't panned out exactly as planned. I mean, it's been a tough economic environment in the past 10 to 11 years. Yolanda, I mean, you were not here. I don't know if you were here, but
no,
it's been tough, a tough economic environment. So this is struggling.
Yes, and unfortunately, the economy cannot thrive on good intentions. I think this story highlights the current state of what Nigeria's, automotive policy is. If people have even been looking at that at the moment, it appears to be stalled. And the investments amounting to the numbers that you just mentioned, I don't want to quote them wrongly, show that there's a lot of stagnation and bureaucratic hurdles in what is going on in this industry. And it's also, it sheds a spotlight. It's time to look at those things with a more detailed eye, with a fine-tooth comb, and see where the issues are. I believe this headline as well on the bottom, the rider, mentioned something about how a lot of those factories were closed in 2024. Could this also have to do with some of the economic situations that we've been going through, such as the dollar? There's a lot to look at. And no, I wasn't there during the time, but you can still understand and see the bigger picture of what is trying to be put forward here.
I mean, the exodus of multinational companies from this country.
Absolutely, and pharmaceuticals, to be precise. They left with so much of of what the economy was banking on at the time. So it's only natural that many other industries would fall to their knees.
Okay, let's go over to the Punch newspaper. Legal profession facing ethical challenges, says CJN. Chief Justice of Nigeria, Justice Kudirat Kekereekun, also went a step further to call on legal practitioners to urgently respond to these concerns and reaffirm their commitment to ethics, discipline, and professional responsibility. I mean, Nkechi, erosion of ethical principles in the legal profession, that's an understatement. It looks like the judiciary is facing trial, and it looks like it's in shambles.
It is, and it's a critical moment when it comes to the legal profession. It's been under scrutiny for so many years, and even worse between, I want to say, 2023 and now. And for the CJN to, I think she always actually comes out to say things like this, and she focuses on threefold: ethics, discipline, professional responsibility. She was telling the body of benchers that, look, you are the apex legal institution, and you should lead the way. You should lead by example. And I think it was the former governor of Lagos that was saying this even needs to start way back from the law school. The people that are admitted into Nigeria to be barristers and solicitors of the Supreme Court. And I know he was saying something about the law school being more practical, that they should scrap the law school altogether and make law students go to do internships. But I think the law school has a mixture of that when they do their externships. But however, what the CJN Kudirat Kekereekun is saying resonates with all Nigerians. And maybe they need to go further than telling us what we already know and what we are experiencing right now in Nigeria.
What are they going to do about it? She is the CJN.
She's the CJN at the end of the day. So during your leadership, you should show that the judiciary is changing. We should see this when it comes to delivering rulings, delivering judgments in the Supreme Court.
Exactly. And to also add that the judiciary is just an example of the rot in basically every sector, you know, of the country. There's, like you said, there's nothing new here. Every sector is suffering from the same problem. So responsibility is equally shared to whether the leadership, but also Nigerians themselves, because you know, everybody is responsible. At the end of the day, it sums up, you know.
You know, a couple of days back, I was joking with some of my friends who are lawyers. You know, they said the judiciary is the last hope of the common man. I said, no, the judiciary is no longer the last hope of the common man. The media is the last hope of the common man, I think.
Is the media, though?
Oh, well.
That's another conversation.
People would actually prefer to take their issues to the media than to take them to court. You know, the court of public opinion.
Rightly so. Rightly
But that's also a problem, because every time Dick and Harry gets anything they want into the media,
anyone can say whatever they feel
I mean,
like, and they will sell it
trust
as
is
fact.
there. But, you know,
no, but there are some things that shouldn't. There are some things that you see in the media that shouldn't make it there. And you're wondering, how did this happen?
I agree with you there,
anyway,
Dr.
look,
Constance.
you people are taking my humor too seriously.
Yolanda, this is not about humor. Go on.
No, I totally agree with you, because then you have people saying anything and it's been passed off as fact.
Yes.
And that is a very scary reality, to know that anybody's life can be changed just like this, just by someone having an opinion. I mean, without calling out.
Accusation.
Absolutely. We just recently heard something of, you know, without mentioning any names, a woman who had 6 children from 6 different men. But that was not fact. It's not factual, but it was sold off, and you have so many people running that story, and yet there's no truth in it.
All right. The media also, you know, we have the pen, but responsibility also comes with that, because it affects a lot of things.
Very true.
Let's see Daily Sun. Rivers, IBAS sacks SSG, commissioners, other political appointees. The Rivers State Sole Administrator, Vice Admiral Ibodeke Ibas, has suspended all political officers and appointees with effect from March 26. These include the Secretary to the Government, Chief of Staff, Chairman, and members of all boards, councils of agencies, commissioners, institutions, and parastatals, special advisors, special assistants, senior special assistants. I mean, the list is comprehensive. And he's going to be there for only 6 months.
Exactly, that's the question.
Look, this is
what sort of disruption is this?
Yeah.
You're going to be there for 6 months. You've fired everybody in a position of responsibility. You'll bring your own men. And knowing what our country is, they definitely are going to go all out to ensure that when they leave, after 6 months, they're definitely not going to leave empty-handed.
Will they leave after 6 months? This is an initial first 6 months, and they have the power to extend it. And I think the sole administrator suspending representative governance is an overreach. I remember in 2013, the courts ruled against this overreach when it came to the emergency of Borno, Yobe, and Adama. The judiciary pushed back when the then government tried to dissolve sort of elected structures. And like you rightly said, Dr. Ikuku, he's only there for an initial 6 months, period. So why, and you're supposed to be there to work with the representatives of the government that are still there to help mitigate the situation, to help bring the state back to normalcy. So why remove all these people? And I think the legality of all this, when it comes to the declaration of state of emergency, suspension of elected officials in River State, is quite blurry. And I hope the Supreme Court this time will not rule on technicalities. We need to understand what this means and what the people who wrote the 1999 Constitution in Section 305, what they intended for it. We need to understand it. It's very blurry.
Well, Nkechi, the president had already started with suspending the governor and the State House of Assembly. So that's where the problem started from. Anyway, let's move on quickly to the international headlines. Citizen newspaper this morning, the laughter died. This is South Africa, a tragic story where a school bus landed in a dam with 42 people drowned. This was on March 27, 1985. They're having a memorial for that, and up to today they don't know what really happened or what caused that plunge into the dam. And then on to Daily Graphic, Parliament abolishes e-levy as the bill awaits President's assent. And then Daily Mirror, today we have the face of Rachel Reeves, the Chancellor of the Exchequer in the UK, almost on all the papers. She's been harangued for deep cuts to government expenses in order to bring the budget under control. I mean, someone has to take the fall to balance the books. So all the papers, let's look at Daily Mail, for instance. It has her face in 3 places. It says, Reeves on the ropes, deluded. And then Daily Express, reckless Rachel tanks economy by killing growth. Onto Daily Graphic, 5 years of record taxes. And then iNewspaper, tax hikes and extra cuts on the way as 250,000 people pushed into poverty by benefits squeeze. I mean, that's a lot. I listened to her yesterday. She says this will be, this will lead to a better future, even if it's painful, but she was defiant, Yolanda. Very tough job she has to do.
Very tough job indeed. I think Keir Starmer's administration is really seeing the fire and facing the heat. I feel quite bad for Rachel Reeves, just as you rightly stated, she's on the front of almost every international newspaper this morning. And even though she's saying that global uncertainty is what forced her hand to do what she's doing, I also believe that she just has some very strong ethics that she's sticking to. She really believes in what she's saying, to be able to stand against everyone and say, we're going to raise the taxes. But unfortunately, the ripple effect on the everyday man is quite dire. Taking benefits from the disabled people and their caregivers at a time where the economy is really on a shutdown and the world is truly, struggling to make things happen. It's quite a tough position that she's in right now, and all I can do is wish her the absolute best.
Well, it's not about just taking the benefits. What she's also saying is that a lot of people that are not working should go back to work.
Absolutely.
It can't be freeloading, to use Donald Trump's word. It can't be freeloading. Okay, quickly, our final paper, The Guardian. U.S. group chat included key Yemen raid details. The Atlantic magazine published more messages from that group chat discussing operational details of plans to bomb Yemen. We know the journalist was accidentally added to the group. A congressional hearing on that, was going on, and this is really testing the Trump administration. We've run out of time for more comments on that, but I think the congressional hearing goes on, and it's a bit chaotic in the U.S. right now concerning that.
It's always chaotic when you have President Donald Trump at the top. But I'm sure tomorrow this story it's still a developing story, so we'll probably have time to talk about it, Dr. Constance Ikuku. And also, I just wanted to mention, I like that here we check the government, we check institutions, and today, following Charles's humorous joke, we try to check ourselves at the media. Thank you so much, Dr. Constance Ikuku, for joining us on Daybreak. And that's all we have for you here this morning. I am Nkechi Nana.
And I'm Charles Eruka. It's goodbye from me.
I'm Yolanda Robert. Please do keep it here on Arise News. The morning show is next. Goodbye.